All right. Hi, everybody. Today is June 24th, and we are at obo-academy. And today we have Sabrina Toro, who's with University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and the TIS Lab. And she is going to be talking about ontology definitions and just definitions in general and why they're important. So, yeah, take it away, Sabrina. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Sarah. Hello, everyone. Um, as Sarah said, we'll talk about definition, a lot of ontology definition, but also um, definitions in general. So I think a lot of principles we talk about today can be taken from the ontology world and use it in the world in general. Before we start, just some disclaimer. The tutorial that I'm going to show you here is based on everything I learned over the years, and it's based on what the ontology experts have been talking about for a long time. So it's really a group effort, I would say. It is possible that you will talk to somebody who would disagree completely with what I will show you. I doubt it's going to be the case in that extreme, but just keep it in mind that this is the representation of what is in the domain at this point in time. Also, as you will see, there's going to be a lot of examples that I made up with ChatGPT. So if you see something absolutely terrible, this is not a reflection of any ontology themselves. It is made up for this tutorial purposes. And lastly, I'm going to tell you now, but remind you at the end of the tutorial, we would really appreciate it if you can take 2 minutes to give your feedback about this tutorial. There's a QR code, there's a link here. I'll share so at the end of the tutorial. It should take you 2 minutes, not longer than that. So thank you. Definitions. Why are they important? Why do we even need them? Well, as we all know, we can a lot of words are being used um, to mean different kind of things. So if I tell you, oh, today I saw the most beautiful violet, we don't know what I mean. If it might be the flower, it might be the color, it might be a poodle called Violet. Um, if I tell you I went to the botanical garden and I saw the most beautiful violet, you will probably assume I mean the flower, but the poodle might have been in that botanical garden. So different name, the same name could mean different concepts, and so just using the name is not always helpful. Now we have some concept that exists that can be referred to using a lot of different names, and this is the only pop culture example let's show you. This individual here has a lot of names that they are referred to, but all of those names represent the same concept, in this case, this artist. So names cannot be trusted. You might say, oh, if I have context, I know exactly what you mean. Well, not necessarily, because context is not always sufficient. So in this made up situation, this alien comes to a vehicle repair um, shop. In the context of this human being, it's very clear that a vehicle means a car. Well, for this alien who has actually looked at Enver, his spacecraft is actually fitting the definition of vehicle. So context is just not sufficient, even when we think it is sufficient. So definitions are really what can make everybody's life better and what can really reduce the confusion and reduce ambiguity. Because by saying this is what I mean when I use this word, then it's very, very clear that we know the concept of what you mean. And you might say, oh, this is an alien. They don't know about what is happening on planet Earth. But it is not only, the aliens. We're all here, I think, in the world of bioinformatics, biocuration, um, and we're still using words to mean completely different concepts. And some things like, disease, allele, everybody has their own idea of what this concept means. And sometimes we will sit in meetings where we argue about how to represent this concept when we're not even talking about the actual same concept. We're just using words. So it's very, very important, especially in the fields we're in, that we clearly define every term that we are using. This is me, and you have heard me, if you have been around me, you have heard me say that a million times. It really doesn't matter what we call this thing, as long as we know exactly what we're talking about. We're golden. We don't need to know anymore. Like, let's call it Bob. That's fine. We just need to know what we are talking about, what the meaning of the concept we are talking about. And if you have followed obo-academy for some times, you have heard me say during that session about using ontologies for data annotation that rule number one of annotating data with ontology term is to annotate to the concept and not to the term name. All right, so ontology terms represent concepts, and the concept is represented by a term ID, and it is represented by the term definition. So when we say that the unique and permanent identifier is very crucial to any ontology terms, this is completely true. But also the definition is crucial for every single ontology terms, because the definition really gives the meaning of the concept. So I talked about words and how to use them. So let's all agree on what I mean by definition in this context and in this presentation. The definition is the formal specification of the meaning of a concept. So the definition identified what something is. This something could be an ontology term. This something could be a data model. It could be whatever you want, but a definition identifies what this is. And it tells you how it is different from something else that might look the same. So a definition really clarifies in the context of the ontology, it defines what this term concept means. And it's so important that, let's look at definition. I'm not finished there. In ontology, we have two different kinds of definition: the textual definitions, the logical definition. The textual definition is really aimed at human. So it is written in human language, i.e., like words with a grammar, and it really helps human understanding what the concept of a term means. It is important because by using this definition, a human can figure out what is this ontology term really the concept I need when I annotate my data. So the definition helps human finding and choosing and using the correct ontology terms. And so, for example, here, the central nervous system neuron, the definition is in English, words that are like in a human readable language. The logical definitions are primarily aimed at machines. So we want to make sure that the computer understands what the concept of a term is. It also helps with the reasoner. It helps with complex query. So the definition that you see here is like in computer language, neuron, and has some allocation, some central nervous system, where all of those terms here actually are represented behind the scene by an identifier. If you need more information about what a reasoner is and how it works and why we need them, there are other obo-academy sessions. if you cannot find anything and you want a session about that, just drop us a line and then we'll make it happen. Um, so the textual definition and logical definitions are both definitions. Therefore, they need to say the same thing. The same, that is, the textual definition and the logical definition of the same term needs to mean the same thing, since we're we're they're giving the concept, the concept meaning of the term. So yes, just make sure that the textual definition and the logical definition says the same thing in different languages, but still the same concept. So definitions are important. There's an obo principle about it. You can find more details here in this link. And basically, the important point that I wanted to have here in terms of what the obo principle is recommending is that the textual definition must be unique, which makes sense since a definition is representing the concept, the concept of the meaning of a concept. A concept should be only having one meaning. The textual definition should follow the genus differentia structure. We talk about that in a minute quite a bit. If there is no textual definition, you need to have a plan and a strategy to make sure that those definitions are being brought in your ontology. We also talked about that later. And that makes sense because, as I mentioned earlier, an ontology term represents a concept, and we need to know what the concept means because we cannot trust the label or the names and all of it. And logical definition should agree with the textual definition and vice versa. This is what I mentioned. And again, it makes sense. Okay, this is when we make you work. And so I'm going to show you some definitions. Spoiler, they're not good. So please take a look and either in the chat or raise your hand and unmute yourself. Sarah is going to help me with folding up on the chat. What's wrong with this definition? And I would call people up if I could see all the people who are here. So you're lucky. Does anyone want to? All right. Well,
Okay, so Harry says in the chat, this definition doesn't tell me what rock is.
yes, that is exactly correct. So when you read this definition, what is rock? We don't know. It could be a dance style. It could be a music genre. When we read this whole thing, it looks more like a description, not really a definition. Um, Also, if you don't have the context of who those people are, you're out of luck. They might be dancers, they might be musicians. Yeah, exactly. Okay, other definition. The heart is a bodily component presumed to facilitate certain functions related to blood movement within the human system. It is commonly recognized for its rhythmic activity and is often associated with symbolic representations of emotion. While its exact operation may vary, its role is generally considered vital to survival. What is the problem with this definition? One of the problem, any problem. Or maybe you think it's perfect, and that's fine too. I should have the Jeopardy theme song. Does anyone want to unmute?
Anyone want to just take a guess? It's okay if you're not right.
Well, the first thing is more things than humans have hearts.
Yep, this is a good point. This is one one good point that is a problem with this definition.
So Claire in the chat is saying it doesn't say anything that is always true.
That
And
is
then
very
yep, and then Harry said if Chris Mungall was here, he'd say something about shadow concepts and included a link. Claire added says presumed often generally.
yes, yes, perfect. See, you guys, you're doing great. So it is still very unclear what this concept means. It's not precise. There's a lot of presumed to, commonly acknowledge, commonly recognized. It's a symbolic representation of emotion. How does it fit in the rest of the definition? And then, as Sue mentioned, heart could be something that is in other species, but then also there could be other quote unquote bodily component that falls in the same in that follows this definition. So okay, I think this is the last one, you guys. A neuron is the basic cellular unit of the nervous system. It is a very short sentence, and yet it has some issues. Anyone?
Sierra says, my first hope would be a logical definition linked to nervous tissue definition and cellular unit definition. And Harry says it's kind of short.
Yeah, it lacks the things to tell me, if something is part of the nervous system, is that automatically a neuron? It gives me no differentia to say what are the other components and how to tell them apart. Yeah, could be a glia, it could be anything.
Yes, exactly. Because depending also of your context and who you're talking to, maybe they don't think that a neuron is the basic unit of the nervous system. Glia might be. And also, based on this definition, if you're looking through a microscope, would you even be able to recognize a neuron? So let's have a quick summary of all of what we have seen. And thank you, everybody who participated. Um, the problem with everything we have seen is that those definitions were not precise, they were not specific enough because they could apply to many different concepts. They were ambiguous, unclear, and based on the quote unquote definition given, that was not enough to really be able to recognize a concept. So here's the anatomy of a good definition. And as I mentioned earlier, this is according to me, based on all the things I have heard from all those all those experts and all the documentation and papers written by all those experts. And there's some links and at the end of the presentation. So a good definition should follow the genus differential structure. We'll talk about that in a minute. This is going to be the bulk of the discussion. It should be self-contained and context independent so that anybody is able to follow, to understand no matter the context. It should be concise because a definition is not a description. It should be correct and verifiable using literature. So I think we're all thinking like, yeah, it should be correct. But this is something that needs to be mentioned. It should be clear and unambiguous, and as we mentioned several times, it should be consistent with the logical axioms. Okay, so genus differentia. This is at least the fourth time I mentioned it. Um, every definition should really follow the genus differentia format. What does it mean? The format is the definition. The definition. The format of the definition is a blank that blank. So the first blank, a genus, This is, in ontology terms, a superclass or the parent class. Think about it if you're not in the ontology world, like what is the main category in which this thing you're trying to define is. That blank, this is the differentia, and this is referring to how your concept differs from the other concept in this category. So if I want to define an apple, I would say it is a fruit that, and then I will find how I can define an apple based on how it's differ from the other fruits in the fruit category. Let's look at examples. These are true examples. I put the ID, so these are good examples. Example from Uberon, an epithelium of the appendix. It is an epithelium that is part of the vermiform appendix. So epithelium is the genus that is part of the vermiform appendix as the differentia. Glutamatergic neurons, it is a neuron genus that is capable of some transmission by glutamate secretion differentia. Examples from Go, cell proliferation involved in heart valve development. It is cell proliferation that is involved in heart valve development. And then a disease, because of course I had to put a disease example here. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis type 12. It is an amyotrophic lateral sclerosis in which the cause of the disease is a variation in this gene. So you can see genus, big, what is the superclass, what is the parent class, and differentia, how what are the differentiating characteristic of the for this term, for this concept. You can see that there's a little bit of variation. The format is a genus that different, a blank that blank. You could have different ways of indicating the differentia. It could be that is part of, that is capable of, that is involved in, as long as you follow that it is a blank, that blank, you good. So one thing to remember, we're still working in ontology, and in general, it's true for everything else. The definition should be more both necessary and sufficient. So necessary means that the definition should hold all the instances of the class. Sufficient should be that anything that satisfies the definition must be in part of the class. We'll look at examples. So glutamatergic neurons, the definition being it is a neuron that is capable of some neurotransmission by glutamate secretion, is actually following both necessary and sufficient conditions, because all it takes for something to be a glutamatergic neuron is to be a neuron and to be capable of neurotransmission using glutamate. Also, if you are a neuron, and if you're number one, a neuron, and you're able to transmit glutamate, then you are a glutamatergic neurons. So this definition is following, this definition for this concept is following the necessary and sufficient rules. This other example, paragangliomas 4, is the definition that I have here is a disorder in which the cause of the disease is a variation in this gene. This is a bad example for necessary and sufficient. So because there are other disorders that are caused by variation in this gene. So this definition is not sufficient to define this specific disease. So we would have probably to either change that it is a disorder. Maybe we need to be more specific, but it is this very specific disorder. So it is a neoplasm, or we would have to add more information saying it has this very specific variation in the specific gene. So genus differentia, making sure that they're all both necessary and sufficient. So let's practice. Let's have fun. It has nothing to do with biology, and this is not pop music. So, assuming everybody knows what a guitar is, feel free to Google it. There's some images here. Here's the definition. It is a musical instrument in which the sound is produced by the vibration of a stretch string. So, two questions. Does the definition follow the genus differentia format? And is the definition necessary and sufficient to refer to the concept of guitar? Same as before, please write in the chat, unmute.
Okay, there's a few that just came in the chat. So Patrick says not sufficient. A sitar is not a guitar. Claire says for number one, yes, and number two, necessary but not sufficient. And then Kai says that's the definition for a superclass to guitar, like stringed instruments. And Kevin says equally wrong for violin.
Perfect. There's a lot of string instruments that are produced by vibration and stretch. So yes, like A+ to everyone. It is necessary because all the guitars fits the definition. You need to have stretch string being vibrating in order to have a guitar. But then also this other instruments that follows this definition that are not guitar, like violin and sitar and all the string instrument you can imagine. There's a lot in my house, but okay. Next practice, of course, if you know me, I had to talk about food. The definition for chocolate cake, it is a dessert in which the main ingredient is chocolate or cocoa powder. Does this definition follow the genus differentia format? And is it necessary and sufficient? And you're welcome to be very annoyed with me because now everybody's thinking of chocolate cake. Sorry, not sorry. What do we think?
Sue says brownies aren't cake, insufficient. Tim says chocolate is not the main ingredient. Claire says, I think this is incorrect. And Tim says, I think flour might be the main ingredient.
All right. There's that all very good point. Now I'm going to think about what is the main ingredient for a chocolate cake. And that is true. Flour would be the main ingredient, but you all got it correctly. So there are other desserts that are not chocolate cake that would fit the definitions, like brownies, chocolate mousse. I had to stop at 3 examples here because I was going on a tangent. But if we change a dessert in which the main ingredient is chocolate cake, if we said it is a cake, then the definition would fit. And then we can talk about like maybe the way we define cake is where the flour might be. This is when ontologists go on and on forever about how to define terms and what terms mean. Thank you for everybody who participated. This is fantastic. So let's take a quick tangent and let me go to that tangent and then we'll talk. We'll see if there's some questions. Genus differentia. Why are they actually really your friends? So here we say we are your friends. Why are they really your friends? First of all, it encourages modularity and reuse. So when you think of the DOS TP pattern or the robot templates that you use in ontology development, this is what they use. We use, a format that really helps creating all those terms in all the terms that represent a similar concept are represented in the same way. If you do not know what those CP pattern and robot templates are, I will refer you to the obo-academy. We can also have an additional tutorial. Just let us know. It is also, so genus differential format is also basically the textual version of what the logical definition is. So that helps also with consistency, and it also helps with supporting definition using AI tools. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the talk. Also, and this is Sabrina talking here, it gives a really good and easy starting point for when you have to write the definitions. I know that it's sometimes difficult to know where to start, especially when you're somebody new into the ontology world. But if you think of the genus differential way of writing definition, it gives you a really good starting point, and that really helps with that. Okay, second tangent, and if you have been working with me uh, over the years in the ontology world, you have heard me say a million times. The genus differential format also means that the first word of your definition really should be representing the concept that you're talking about. So, and I have seen that, not exactly like that, but I have seen that so many times. A definition that says something along the lines of high sugar concentration in blood. This is not helping. Same thing as the very first example about rock. What does it mean? Are we talking about the disease? Are we talking about a phenotype? Are we talking about a lab result? Are we talking about a movie? We could be talking about absolutely anything here. So the first words of your definition needs to be clearly saying what we're talking about, what the genus is. So if it's a disease, we can start the definition with it is a disease that blah 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 blah, or it doesn't have to be the word disease, but the first word should be a word of a disease concept. It should be a disease concept. Same way, if we are talking about a lab result, the first word should be referring to a lab result. Same way if it is referring to a movie or whatever. Just the first word needs to refer to the concept that is the genus. And this is actually something that all dictionaries do. If you were in English class, if you're in an English-speaking country, or French class, if you were in a French-speaking country, you can see how much PTSD I have over this. The first word of a definition always refer to the concept of the word. So if you're defining a noun, the first word of a definition is a noun. If you're defining a verb, the first word of the definition is a verb, and so on and so forth. So keep that in mind, because that is really helping with genus differential. It means the genus needs to come first. So we are really clarifying from the very beginning what the concept is. If you're going to get anything from this tutorial, anything at all, it is this whole genus differential format of definition. So I want to take a minute or so in case there's any questions before we move on and look at other good things to know about ontology, about definitions, and what to look at. Any questions? Okay.
Wait.
If this, yeah. Yay, question.
Thank you. This is a really good presentation. I think it's really good for people not necessarily working on ontologies, but also on data models more generally. So I'm listening with a rapt attention. And one of the things I noticed was that one of your slides said, this is what ontologists talk about definitions forever, especially when you're defining the word cake. And I was wondering, is there any best practices for bringing in lots of the ancestors of that term into the genus definition for a leaf term. So if I said a cake, I sort of am leaving it as an exercise to the user to look up what cake means, right? So that they don't use urinal cakes to talk about chocolate cakes. But do I then bring like a higher level? Do I say a dessert, a cake that is a dessert that is chocolate? Do you know what I mean? How
I
far do you
totally
go?
know what you mean, and this is, if not the next slide, one of the next 5 slides. And yes, I'll answer your question in a minute. But this is it's a very good point. Yeah, I'll tell you very soon. Any other questions? Okay, let's continue here. So, I like Sierra. It's gonna be in 2 slides. So keep that thought. Okay, so definitions should be next. So we talked about the anatomy of a good definition. Now we talked about the genus differentia. Now let's talk about the fact that definitions should be self-contained and context independent. So definitions should make sense on their own, and it shouldn't require any external context. This example, defining photosynthesis, it is the thing that plants do with sunlight. I give you 15 seconds to think about all the things that are wrong with its definitions. So this definition is not self-contained. It assumes that we know what, quote unquote, the thing is. If you're a biologist, you kind of know what it means, but if you're not a biologist, you don't know. Also, it is really it is not context independent. This is assuming that you're thinking about the word photosynthesis in the context of plant biology. It could totally be a definition that fits with whatever happens in a video game. So this definition, you need to make sure that your definition is context independent so that anybody can see it and understand. So something that is better is something like the process by which green plants transform, uses sunlight to produce glucose and oxygen, blah blah blah. Yeah, when you look at and when you write a definition, just think, would somebody who's not in my field be able to understand this definition? So this is where I come to your question, Sierra. Your definition should be concise and therefore avoid the quote unquote chit chat. Definition should be fitting in one sentence, and you need to remember a definition is not a description. So let's look at examples. Because of the time, I will give you 15 minutes to think about it. 15 seconds. 15 minutes is a lot of time. And then I'll give you the answer just so that we can go through the rest of the tutorial. This is a definition for chickenpox, a contagious childhood disorder caused by the varicella zoster virus. It is transmitted by blah, blah, blah. It presents with a vesicular rash, blah, blah, blah. What is wrong with this definition? There's a lot of blah, blah. So this entire part here is really a description. We don't need it. It has a lot of information that, sure, it's cool, but it is not helping with the definition. Another example, macrophage activation involved in immune response. It is a change in morphology and behavior of a macrophage resulting from exposure to cytokine, all of those things that leads to the initiation of or perpetuation of an immune response. If we were just strictly following genus differentia, we would probably have something that says it's a macrophage activation that leads to the initiation, blah, blah, blah. So this entire part here, the entire sections here actually represents not the word, it's not the word macrophage activations, it is actually the definition for macrophage activation. And so this is what you mentioned earlier, Sierra. So in this case, the people who wrote the definitions decided that it was they should add the definition of this genus to make it clear what the meaning is. Another example of such a thing is cardiac jelly development. So the definition is the process by which outcome is the progression of the cardiac jelly over time. And then the definition add, this is what the cardiac jelly is. So adding the cardiac jelly. So in this case, it was clear enough that cardiac jelly was not something that people might regular person in the street know. So they added the definition of cardiac jelly just after the main definition of the term, and this is a way to help user to know what cardiac jelly is instead of them having to go outside this ontology and having to find whatever that term means. So in the example of cake, it is a cake that has the principle. What did I say? It has the major ingredient is chocolate or cocoa butter. We could imagine having a cake is blah blah blah. It has flour, blah blah blah. Okay, another example here. Epithelium of the biliary system. It is the epithelial layer covering the biliary system. It fits the genus Differentia. This includes the epithelium of the gallbladder and blah, blah, blah. This part, we might think like, okay, we don't need that in this definition, but also it gives some good information about what that concept is. So basically, the definition should fit in one sentence, and the definition is not a description. However, giving more context can really help the understanding of what the context is. So adding a definition of one of the terms helps, like we saw with the cardiac jelly. Adding in this previous example, adding that this includes all of this information that also help understanding. If you're a curator and you're looking for a term, this helps you decide which term is appropriate for whatever you need or not. However, so this is fine, but if you're gonna add some more text, then make sure you add it after the first sentence. So first sentence should be the definition. After the definition, you can add additional information that makes sense, that could help. Also, adding it in a separate field, like a comment on an or an editor's note, is something that you can also think about, because the definition is the definition. Anything else should not be in the definition, because how big do you want your definition to be? So let's take another detour, because I know this is coming. How do you decide whether something should be in the definition or whether something should be in a comment or in an editor's note? This is a very good question. I don't have a clear answer. What I can tell you is that there's a few things that you should think about and should consider when you are in this situation. So one of the things is thinking about the ontology browsers. Some ontology browsers do not show the comments, the comment field, or the editor's field. So if there's something very, very important or very crucial, it might not be displayed in the ontology browser that a user is using for looking at ontology. So, for example, adding that extra definition here, or adding this extra piece of information here in the definition, really ensure that whoever human is looking at this really understand clearly, okay, I don't need to go anywhere else. Everything is here in my definition. So the way you can look at it is how would adding this information really help users determine what the concept of the term is. If you are, if you are in a, I don't know, in a bakery ontology and you see the word cake and you have like, it is a cake that is, that has primarily chocolate as an ingredient, then it's probably okay to not add in the definition a cake is blah blah blah. If the word chocolate cake is in a bigger context, then maybe you're like, oh yeah, there's a high possibility that there could be a confusion about what cake is. And so in this case, I feel like I'm going to add it. So it's really, there's no rules. It's really context dependent. If you have something that cardiac jelly is probably not something that everybody has heard of, so adding the definition makes sense. If you're talking about heart, you might not feel like heart is something important to add in the ontology, and that if somebody doesn't know what heart is, they can look it up. That being said, I'm going to reiterate here. Definitions should always be contained in the first sentence, be clear and concise, and it is making sure that the concept that is the definition represents the concept in a way that is not ambiguous. So hopefully, Sierra, that answers your questions.
Yes, thank you. Perfect.
It is, it is an answer, but also it's a non-answer. So, okay. Next important or crucial point of a good ontology: definition must be correct. It seems very obvious, but as science and knowledge changes, it is the case that sometimes some definitions are not correct anymore. And so adding references or different references to definitions is always a good practice. Not only because it gives provenance for the information, but then also if you need to review because new knowledge came to light, you need a way to figure out, and it having references really support this review. So these are some examples with all the obo ontology I have found. The has dbxref is the property that is used for all the ontology I have found. It doesn't mean that it is the only one used. But yeah, adding a PMID, or here for Uberon, adding the fact that this definition was automatically generated, and then they actually add it also in the definition, so it's very clear to the users where this definition came from. Definition should be clear and unambiguous, and here are some examples that we already sort of mentioned. You should avoid vague terms like "it may do this," "it usually is arise from there," "in both cases," blah blah blah. This is really not helping anyone figure out what the concept actually is. In this case, if the definition says it is a neoplasm that usually arise from this location, what if you're looking at a neoplasm that is not, that does not follow the usual way of things? So avoid this sort of terms in your definition. Make sure that you focus on what the entity is and not what it is not. So as we mentioned at the beginning, neuron, if you want to define, let's say, glia, don't say it is the thing that is not a neuron. It still doesn't help you figure out understanding what it actually is. So focus on what the entity is and not what it is not. Similarly, focus on what it is and not what it does. So mitochondrium, definition, don't avoid saying things like the mitochondrium is the part of the cells that produce energy. Instead, really try to focus. This is an organelle, and this is what it is. it is composed. And then you could add something, maybe depending on your context, about energy producing, but try to define a term about what it is and not what it does. Also, avoid being super specific. If you can say it's a bone that is part of a finger, it's enough. You don't need to be over specific about, like, it is a bone that is shaped in this way and blah blah blah, because it's just more chit chat. It is over specifying things. So this is not something that is needed. And avoid replicating the name of the class in the definition, because if you start your definition with the name of your class and then the name or your label changes, then you're stuck with that in your definition. I'm speeding up a little bit just because of the time. So it is all good, but in practice, things are a bit different, right? We're all in ontology, and we know that it is not all perfect, and that's fine. We are working on that. So some definitions are often a replica of the term label. For example, a blood vessel size is defined as the size of a blood vessel. Not great, but also this is what the logical definition means. And if we know what size means, that's fine. It is what it is. If we want to change the label to say, Bob is defined as the size of blood vessel, it would be fine. So, yeah. Also, there's a lot of ontology terms that do not have definitions for many reasons. We're not going to go there. And sometimes it is because the term label is very obvious, like, for example, blood vessel size. But we have seen at the very beginning of the presentation, obvious is not always obvious to everyone. So, and also, if you don't have a definition, a computer is probably not going to figure it out on their own. And so, if you remember, also at the beginning of the call, of the discussion, the obo principle says, if you don't have definitions, you need a strategy to provide definitions. So, what are the strategies? Well, let's talk about them very quickly. First of all, you can use you can programmatically generate this logical definitions. This is very just TP pattern centric, and this is easy, fantastic, easy to go. We follow a pattern. That's great. We can also use AI to write definitions, and of course, nowadays you cannot have anything that doesn't mention AI. Last year, we published a paper, and some of you who are here on the call were part of this paper, where we basically ask AI to write definitions, ontology definition for different ontologies, and curators reviewed those, and we evaluated those definitions. And in general, those definitions were really not that bad, actually. When we looked at the definitions, and of course, when we evaluated them, we didn't know who wrote what. But the AI definitions, the human written definitions were nicer and in a better language, but the definitions written by AI were really not bad. And that was last year, or actually the work was like late 2023. And so now it's getting even better. So what we realize also is that if your ontology really follows the best practices in writing definitions, then AI does even better. So yes, AI and writing definitions, we can have a whole discussions about that, but not now because we're running out of time. So in summary, I'm getting there. In summary, definitions are really, really, really important. They're crucial. Definitions are the meaning of a concept, and people using ontology terms really are using the concept and not the name. So do take the time to write them down, because it is important. Definitions allow understanding of the concepts, and also support AI readiness. The best practices: use number one definition, textual definition and logical definition should say the same thing. We said that multiple times. We hopefully all understand why. And use the genus differentia format because it is helpful and it works for all of this. Remember that the rules applies, so the definitions should be sufficient and necessary. One term cannot have two definitions, and two terms cannot have the same definitions. If two terms have the same definition, it means they're the same thing. Therefore, we should have only one term. If one term has two definitions, it means that this term has two different concepts. So this should be split. I want to finish by giving you some tips because I know that especially if you're new to curation and to ontology development, it's a little bit tough. So how do you go about writing definitions? Really seriously, genus differentia is really, really your friends. And use the pattern that exists. So if I need to define an apple, okay, what is the bigger concept of an apple? It's a fruit. What are the differentiating characteristic of an apple? Let's say it's green. Well, can I think of other things that are fruits and nuts and green and are not apple? Can I think of all the apples and all the apples also green? So use the genus differentia and that third process because it is really, really good starting point and it really helps. Practice. It's like with everything. If you want to play violin very nicely, you need to practice. Same thing. You need to feel more comfortable with writing definitions, and the only way to do that is really to practice. Look at your definition and put yourself in somebody else's shoes. So if I know nothing about the concept, if we didn't discuss anything, if I'm not part of the discussion, would I still be able to understand the concept and understand whether or not what I'm looking for is that specific concept? And lastly, do not let the labels fool you. This is an example for the disease world. We all have those examples where this things like syndrome or idiopathic in the label, and then you think, oh, it means that this disease is idiopathic, and it's not. So do not trust labels, do not trust name, really only trust concepts. So last two things, sources and acknowledgement. We're gonna link to the slides. There is this blog post from Chris Mongol, this page, this publication from all of these are these experts. Obo-academy, the AI document. Again, a lot of those images and example came from AI, so it is what it is. And thank you for taking the time to. Thank you for listening. Even if you're watching this recording, please take the time. It really will take 2 minutes and it will make a lot of differences, a big difference if you can take 2 minutes to just give us some feedback about how this tutorial was and what was good, what was not great. So thank you for those 2 minutes and thank you for listening. And we have 0 minutes for questions, but if you have any questions, please send us an email and we can definitely, I don't know, have another session. If there's a lot of questions, we can have another session about definitions, or we can definitely discuss that on the Slack channel. Thank you, everyone. And if you have a burning question, I can still stay here for a minute or two.